I'm Gabe Erickson, the CEO of Warrior Transition Outdoors, and we have a great episode. Carolyn Brice is with us. Let's get it going. So, we met in the most auspicious of ways, would you say?
I would.
What were your
Just
thoughts?
split up in those DMs.
Slid in those DMs. Do you get a lot of DMs? Because you seem to have some really good content going.
I do. I wouldn't say it's like, 50 to 100 a day, but I get a DM here and there. Definitely asking questions on stories, things about reels, etc. But
Yeah. Well, what drew me to yours, and I couldn't even find the video if I tried, I bet, but you were finishing a race and you had put like text over that's it talked about like whatever your skill level, like just putting in the effort, it's not about the finish kind of thing. And
okay.
the Revenant race that we're putting on is all about that. We literally stripped away the finish line and we have a start line only. And we're telling people go as far as you can go and let that finish line be here. So
Yeah.
that struck me. Is that kind of an ethos for you, or is that one of the many things you believe? Or talk about that.
So I have a whole range of people that I coach, from very beginners, like just learning how to run a mile, to people that want to, better their marathon time. And so I see with a lot of people, they get so wrapped up in like, I've got to hit this certain pace, or I've got to, do this many miles. And I just want to get people back to like, why did you start in the first place? Like there had to be some reason beyond that, that to get you out the door. And so I think a lot of people forget that once they like start training, they get so wrapped up in it and they forget like the real reason why they're running. And so I do try to like get people to come back to like, this should be fun. Like none of us are elite athletes, we're not going to the Olympics. We just need to, find our joy in running. And so I do try to like instill that in the people that I coach and the people that follow me on Instagram.
I could end the podcast there, and that got the message across as to like what we're trying to almost redefine for people, at least as far as they experience us in this race, like reevaluating what fitness means to us, and when you make it all about looking good and all, feeling sexy, whatever the wrong things might be, it's nothing
Right.
with those things. But thank you for summarizing that, I guess is what I'm saying. You mentioned coaching a few times. You own Run with C, which is like a coaching business, is that correct?
Yeah, so I started it about 2 years ago. I've been running for, this will be 20 years this fall, or 21. I can't even keep track. And it was back in COVID. I was like, I want to do something more, kind of bored, not having much to do socially. And I always thought about coaching. And so I got like an online certification and decided to just throw it out there, like created Run with C Instagram. And yeah, so coaching about 18 athletes right now, and it's fun.
That sounds fun. Good for you. When did you realize like people were leaning on you for that level of expertise and not just being inspired by you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I've always had just friends ask me questions because they knew I was the runner, and like, how should I get started, or what shoes should I wear, simple things like that. And I just always loved sharing my personal advice and what I loved about running with others. So I thought, why don't I expand this to actually coaching people?
That's awesome. Is Instagram, Facebook, are those the main ways people can get a hold of you? Or as far as Run with C goes, like give us that elevator pitch. I want people to go to you if they're interested after watching this.
Yeah, I would say Instagram is definitely like the main source of information that I put out. I am on Facebook, but it's just kind of like everything that I post on Instagram copies over to Facebook. So there's not really a whole lot of new info there. If you are someone that I'm coaching, I have like a private Facebook group within that platform. And so I allow all my athletes to connect with each other and like share about their races and what have you. I also have a website. It's runwithc.squarespace.com. So that's how you can find out like about what coaching includes, pricing, all that sort of stuff. But I would say the main way to get a hold of me is through Run with C.
Okay. I just want to make sure I gave you that opportunity because that's
Yeah, thanks.
kind of what we want to do with this podcast. If people have a brand beyond their story, and we want to elevate those brands because we're trying to elevate the sport, we want to elevate the right mindsets around fitness, like the love and the joy of it, things like that. Speaking of that, though, you mentioned the word love and joy several times. Like, bring me back to your love. Like, how did that develop? I know I read in your bio is kind of a competitive thing, but when did you feel like this is like a soul thing for me?
Ooh, that's hard. I would say it was probably in high school. I mean, I didn't love it the way that I love it now, but I loved being on cross country and having a team of people that shared the same love of the sport. And then I really grew into loving distance running after I met my husband because he got me into running my first half marathon. And that's when I was like, wow, this long distance running is so awesome. And, it's just something you can't really describe until you do it.
Oh.
But I guess so early 20s would be when I really fell in love with the sport and getting into marathon distance.
What is it about that distance specifically? Because you've run how many marathons now? A lot?
It's 5. Yeah, 5.
Okay, that's a lot to someone like me. Uh, and 20 half marathons and a bunch of 5Ks and 10Ks and things. What is it about that half marathon distance that just feels good to you?
The half marathon distance is my favorite because marathon training takes a lot out of you. It is a lot to devote to running all the miles in training, and you're tired. And half, it's just not quite as much. And I just love it's the perfect distance to me because 5Ks, 10Ks, they just seem a little bit too short. You want to go longer, and 13 is just not too much where it's getting into that exhaustive marathon distance.
Yeah. Do you go through kind of like an inner dialogue as you're in these races?
Oh, totally. Yes. I mean, the mental game of this sport is probably, I mean, it's 100% as important as the physical. Um, so yeah, I do a whole array of things, like from telling myself about like not starting too fast to like you can do it as it's getting harder throughout the race. I'm a religious person, so a lot of times I will actually pray during races when things get tough. So yeah, there's a whole lot of inner dialogue going on.
Yeah. And we've already on this show, we've had people of all sorts of backgrounds. And so this is a free space to share that kind of stuff. Like you're trying to talk to God as you run. Is that what you're saying? Like,
In races, a lot of times, yeah, I will. Because especially in marathons and half marathons, you could start at miles 1 to 4 and you're feeling great and you don't know what's going to happen 6 miles down the road. Like anything can happen in these races. And so, yeah, a lot of times I'll just say, like, keep me feeling good, like keep me from hitting the wall, what have you, and just, let me enjoy the race. And so, yeah, I'll have a lot of conversation with them.
have you always had that mental toughness, or do you think that kind of came over time?
Um, I think it was definitely probably developed. I had a really great cross country coach in high school, who really she instilled her passion for running in me, and I think a lot of my mental and physical fortitude was developed through her. And so through having that coach, I try to like embody how she taught me about running with the
Mm.
people that I lead. So it's definitely something that's still growing. I struggled a lot actually this past year with injury. And so I really had to dive into the reason why I run and my mental strength with everything. So I've actually looked into a lot of books this year related to that. Some of my favorites are the reason why I run and um, Des Linden's new book, Choosing to Run, is really good. The Comeback Quotient is really good. So yeah, something I'm still developing.
I've heard injuries are really where that mental toughness is tested, even beyond like in the race or races themselves, right? So I
Mhm.
can I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
races are they're a beast sometimes, especially when you're running for 26 miles.
for real. What is your background? You did residency. Are you tell us about that? And I know you have some experience with veterans as well. So
Yeah, so my background outside of running, because running is just, one aspect of my life. I went to school at UNC Chapel Hill and um, majored in biology and then went on to do pharmacy school. I always knew I wanted to be in the medical field,
yeah,
just didn't know if I wanted to do medical school in itself. So I was like, well, I like pharmacy. It sounds like a good option. And within pharmacy school, in your fourth year, you have to do clinical rotations. And so I did one at our state psych hospital, and I loved it. I loved the changing environment that psychiatry brings and all of the patients. And I just felt like it was something that I was called toward to do. And so after school, I went on to do residency. And for pharmacy, it's your first year is just a generalized residency. And then the second year is when you specialize in a particular area. So I fell back on loving that psychiatry rotation and decided to do psychiatry for my second year, and went out to the Central Texas VA to do that. And then I've been with the VA ever since.
so you're back. Are you in North Carolina or are you
I'm
Virginia?
in I'm in North Carolina. Yeah, I moved back to North Carolina after I was in Texas for a year, and I've worked for the Fayetteville VA
I
since
see.
then.
And
Yeah.
how's that going? Because from our veterans, nonprofits, we hear all sorts of mixed stories about the VA. So, how is it
Yeah.
going working there?
I like working for the VA. I really do. I love helping veterans. It's different from the experience I had in school. But I have stayed for 7 years now, and I do see, the pros and cons that veterans have with their VA experience, but I hope that having, people like me that actually like their job and want to help people, that they'll, have a different aspect as far as the VA goes.
Everyone we've met that works at the VA is awesome, and so it seems like if there is an issue, it's more of a system thing than a people thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is oftentimes, the red tape of a government administration, but
Do you have any like military background in your family, or is this kind of a new foray for you to like deal with this population and to help them?
so the only military background I have is just my two grandfathers served in World War II. But other than that, no military background. I just, you know, um, for pharmacy, we don't have a whole lot of options for us to practice the way that I do. So I'm like working at the full scope of my license. So I see patients one-on-one for medication management of mental health disorders, and it's hard to do that outside of somewhere like the VA. The VA is really progressive with their pharmacists, and they let us practice like that. So I basically work, the same way that a psychiatrist does, where I can see patients, adjust their medications. It's just that I have the pharmacy background and not a doctor of or a medical doctor degree. Sorry.
What is kind of like the why behind the running? What is your why? Like what moves you out of bed to go to work? Would you say? What is it? What's the purpose there in your heart?
So my why is that just the way that it makes me feel. I feel so much better after I go for a run. It's my alone time. It's my time to, like clear my head. And I mean, beyond that, I have obviously goals associated with my running, but the real reason why I do it is just, for the way I feel. Like when I can't run, it's a bummer. You don't get that same feeling from going out for a run as you do going for a bike ride. At least I don't.
Yeah, if you could just hand some of that energy through, I'll take it. I get inspired myself for that. But what about like what else moves you? That's kind of what this podcast has become about. Is it started off with like, hey, let's talk about the running or the cycling or whatever, and then it's just been people talking about like homesteading, or you just talked about like your work or your marriage. What else is like super important to you and drives you?
Well, I guess, like wanting to help others because, I'm working in mental health, working with people to get them to be better runners themselves. That's something that drives me. I mean, in terms of like what I love, I love going to the beach. I live at the beach. So being outdoors is something that moves me. I'm pretty much, if I can be outdoors, I'm outdoors all the time. Um,
You understand like the healing power of nature.
yeah. Totally. I can't stand being inside. At the end of every day, I'm like always outside. I start and end my days outside. I'm only inside when I have to work.
Um, what is one of the can you think of any stories with some of your athletes that you're coaching? Do you have any like proud moments, or maybe it's the story over time, or a moment? Like what stands out to you as one of the stories that came out of coaching?
I'd say some of my like biggest, proudest moments are gonna be when athletes set like their hard to reach goals and they hit them. One in particular, I had a girl come to me last fall that she wanted to run her first marathon. She had done a half and she wanted to move into that marathon distance. And um she she was nervous, like who wouldn't be to tackle that kind of training cycle and distance. And so she wanted help to do it like safely. She didn't have any time goals, she just wanted to finish. And she had gotten into the Monterey, yeah, it's in Monterey, Big Sur, sorry, I couldn't think of the name of it, marathon. And you have to like enter a lottery to get in that one. So it's a big deal to get in. And she was going to travel out to California alone, like lives on the East Coast. And so that was another, barrier. Like I've got to tackle these 26 miles and I'm going to travel across the country to do this by myself. So coaching her, just to like focus on you just want to finish the race, you don't need to stress about every single run. You might not meet every single run perfectly and what have you. And then when it led up to going out there, she was really nervous. Like, can I do this? I didn't feel like my training went perfectly and all this stuff. And so sat down with her and like had a virtual call and was like, let's break this up into mileage by mileage. You just need to tackle like these 6 miles, then these 6 miles. Don't think about the big 26 miles as a whole. Just get through each block. And I think that really helped her. And she went out there and had a blast and loved it and wants to do another one. And so I think that was kind of like my proudest moment, like seeing her go from, I don't know if I can do this to I want to do this again. And just, seeing people fall in love with the sport like I love the sport.
I'll say that I think you mentioned that in your bio as well, just wanting more people to get involved with the sport. And so a little bit of background on WTO, our nonprofit, we take a holistic approach to help veterans and their families transition to civilian life.
Mm.
We do that through like lifelong family advocacy and outdoor adventure. And that outdoor adventure component is exactly what you described, like and understand that. And running is a big part of that, like just getting outside, even if it's just to walk or run.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you said that in your bio, I'm like, man, everything you believe in continues to resonate with what we're trying to do here. Um, what is your message to people who, I'm more of a weightlifter, but I feel like I need to get more into that, moving my body in that way. Like, what is your message to people not in love with running? Um,
Yeah.
what do you say to people? What can
That's a hard one. Because I get that from majority of family and friends, they don't get it. They're like, why in the world would you want to run? Um, so I kind of, for people that are interested but not sure they want to do it, it's more like just try it. Just, go out there and you don't have to run a whole mile. Walk, run it, see what you can do and keep doing it and just see if anything changes in your mindset around it. But it is tough to convince people to start running for sure.
like they have to do it, like it's kind of like certain foods or certain activities you have to do 3 to 10 times before it becomes
Yeah.
not hard to do, right? Like it becomes a habit or whatever. Is that, have you seen that, or
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, with some of the beginner runners that I coach, like, consistency is hard. You know, they find it hard to get out there. It's hard to breathe, and so just trying to tell them, you know, like, why did you want to start in the first place? Falling back on that why really helps with getting people to stay consistent.
Yeah. We're trying to create a narrative around fitness that it's about knowing who you are, like discovering who you are, um, and becoming who you like are. You know what I mean? To us,
Mhm.
it's not about like looking good. That's an outcome of things, but I feel like the deeper the why, the easier it's going to be to continue on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What are some of the whys that you've noticed like stick?
Um, People that do it for like their physical health, um, people that do it for their mental health. That's a big one. Um,
You mentioned the joy of it for you, and here you are.
yeah, joy. Yeah, just how it makes you feel. Reaching new goals for some people is a big motivator. So like, because I mean, you may hit one goal, like I want to run a half marathon in less than 2 hours. So you hit that, and then you need to set a new one. Your goalpost is always moving.
What are some if you were to give a free coaching lesson to the newbies out there, like here's running 101, what do you need to give it an honest shot the first time?
Um, Definitely I would tell them to walk run, because I feel like most people, they go out the door and they just try to run as hard as they can for a mile, and then they're like, that was terrible. I don't know why people run. And so I coach people, it's through the 80-20 method, where it's 80% of your runs are done at an easy conversational pace. And for a lot of new runners, that's going to be walking. So it's kind of getting people to realize that, like, I don't need to be sprinting to do this. I got to build up that aerobic fitness. And I have certain moments during the week where I can run harder, but just realizing that, like, you don't have to push. You can take it easy, and over time you'll become a better runner, but it does take a lot of time. And I think people don't realize that, like, you're not going to go from being a walk runner to a 20-minute 5K in 3 months.
Right. Yeah. How did you meet your husband at an event or did you meet outside?
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay. I
no.
know.
We met at a bowl game in Nashville. We both went to the same college, and so we were there and kind of had mutual friends and met
Okay.
that
How
way.
do you guys do a lot of running together? Is it pretty individual still for you, or how does that relationship?
So we yes and no. When we first met, my husband had just run a marathon, and so he got me into that long distance. Since then, he's done several halves with me, but he's kind of fallen back in love with golf. That's his go-to sport at this time. So he still runs. Just we don't share the same love of running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you see your coaching business going? Like, what is your vision for that?
Um, Honestly, I mean, I'd love to see it grow a lot more. I'd love to, work alongside other coaches, but just kind of in the first stages of developing it. So right now I'm kind of content with where it is, but if it grows, I'd love to see that.
I mean, 18 athletes, that's pretty awesome. I think that's
Yeah. Yeah.
and what is your next personal challenge? Do you have a race that you're training for right now, or are you taking a break, or where are you at?
Yeah, so I don't have anything right now. I just ran Boston in April, which was kind of like my dream race. I had qualified for it back in 2020, and the race ultimately ended up getting canceled and switched to a virtual race, which was pretty devastating at the time, because I trained for it in the spring and then they postponed it to the fall. So I trained for it again and then they made it virtual, which was really lame to run virtually around your neighborhood. So finally getting to do that race was a big deal, because if you're not a runner and you don't know anything about Boston, like, you have to qualify to get in it, and it's really hard to actually qualify. And so doing that race and training for it was a lifelong dream. So I've over the past 2 months just been kind of like recovering from a nagging hamstring injury that popped up during training for that. And so right now I've been really focused on a lot of strength training, which it sounds like is your go-to. So I've been focused on becoming like a stronger runner. So when I get back to running a lot more mileage, won't have issues with injuries. I hope to run a half in the fall, but don't have anything on the calendar. My dream goal that I don't put out there a lot is to break 3 hours in the marathon, but I've got 17 minutes to shave off. So it's a big reach goal for me.
I know depending on, I mean, I don't know much about the times and all those things, but
Yeah.
17 minutes for some, I mean, that could be, it sounds like a lot, but is that easily shaved? Or is that like when the margins are smaller when you get to that 3 hour mark?
Yeah, so when you're like just starting and you run a marathon, it could be pretty easy to take, big chunks of time off between like your first and your third or what have you. As you start to get more advanced in the marathon, it's harder to bring that mileage time down. So that would have to drop my pace from around like a 7:30 pace per mile for the marathon down to a 6:50. So it's pretty significant. But gonna put that goal out there and keep working towards it. So
We'll have to have you back on once
yeah,
so we can
I
hear
break 3 hours.
it.
Might be 5 years from now, but I'll
Hey,
hold you to it.
yeah, absolutely. Do let us know when that happens. I believe that you're easy, you're on track. Do you have a race like the Boston was like your dream race? Is there another one now that you're like our episode 2 is with Demi Knight Clark and she's done all the 6 stars. So
Oh yeah.
is that something like you want to accomplish or
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do it. It's not like something that I have to do. I do think it would be cool. I would love to run Chicago or New York, which are two of the other world majors, just because they seem like such awesome big races. And I like the big races because they're fun. There's so many people out cheering for runners, and just the like community aspect of those races is awesome.
well, that's awesome. Anything else you want to add? I really appreciate, you coming on, knowing nothing about our organization, nothing about our race, but being willing
Yeah.
to share because this podcast, our event is August 12th, and
Okay.
the podcast is going to live on beyond that, right? And we want to continue to build it, kind of like you said, we want people to get outdoors. I don't care if you're golfing or hunting or running or walking. There's a value in just being out in nature, and so that's what this podcast is trying to accomplish, right? But anything else you want to share from your perspective on anything we talked about?
No, I don't think so. I love that y'all are doing that and helping more veterans get outside and get moving. I love to see that.
Yeah, well, and thanks for coming on. Again, runwithc.squarespace.com or runwithc on Instagram.
Yeah, so it's run_with_C is how to find me. But
Okay,
yep, that's where I am.
awesome. Well, thank you again, and we appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you.